Alright, everybody, we should be here, we should be live, we should be going well. Obviously, a massive NBA slate, a dozen games on this evening slate. Gonna give it a minute or two for people to file in. Certainly quite a lot going on. We'll do everything we can to discuss all these games. I won't say in depth because we don't have nearly enough time to manage that task, but enough so that we can hit on some of the highlights, and then it being this date, this time, and this many games, I'm expecting some sort of bullshit to break during the show, and hopefully provide us with some nice pivots towards some of the other chalky options that are out there today. Make some people some more money. Congratulations to everyone who was a Wiener yesterday. Shout out to our very own awesome subscriber Rimpack, who had himself a nice day long since. Due for that good man. Let's go ahead and looking for looking for someone to show a retweet to me. As soon as I see that, I will bang that out and get right on that. Loading up the premium Slack. Nice dozen games. Shout out to Russell Westbrook, obviously, for the incredibly rare 2020 second time in the history of the National Basketball Association putting up such a massive stat line, sharing that distinction only with Wilt Chamberlain. Alright, let's go ahead and get into this slate, doing another quick news check as something seems to break every 30 seconds or so. I will not have any rankings for today. This represents the fourth time out of 203 shows or whatever that number is. I sincerely apologize, but I've been indisposed for the last 45 minutes or so, unavoidably, and that very little I can do about that with all the changing news and missing the better part of that hour, so my sincerest apologies if that's part of your lineup building process or process in general, and I am hamstringing you a little bit on this evening. I'm going to get right into it now. Let's talk about the Knicks going in to visit the Magic, and a very Fizdalian thing. We are going to have only recently out of the rotation Mario Hezonja back in and starting at power forward for Luke Kornet, so we should expect them to start Mudiay, Dotson, Knox, Kornet, and Mitch Robinson. This is not a particularly great matchup. I think there's a chance that you get, some Mario Hezonja, both the 3 and the 4. Difficult to know exactly how they'll distribute the minutes. This team is very thin without news of Alonzo Trier yet, I don't think. Up at guard, Kadeem Allen is still out with his concussion. Dennis Smith Jr. is still doubtful. So you are looking at a full batch of minutes for Emmanuel Mudiay, who normally 6,500, especially same price on FanDuel, I'd have some interest in. Slate this size, you can probably do better. Not really a whole lot to love on this team anywhere. I think, especially on FanDuel, you can run out, or basically only on FanDuel, you can run out $4,100 Mario Hezonja. I would rather run Troy Brown. I would rather run Tyreek Evans. Not guys on this team who rank very highly for me. Mitch Robinson up to 9,200 on FanDuel. That's now kind of appropriately priced. Had a massive game against Vooch and against this team earlier this year. I don't think he's really in play there, just again because of the size of the slate and the superfluity of other fairly sexy plays out there. But 7,100 on DK should certainly still bear some of your attention. Again, tons of great centers tonight from him, down to good value like Hernan Gomez and Drummond and Vooch. Across the ball, Vooch himself incredibly looks very good on FanDuel. Guy who had, price had gone up a little bit. DK price now higher than the FanDuel price, 9,500 on FanDuel. One of the guys I like the most. Knicks, obviously very bad. And Orlando still needing this game for making it into the playoffs and even potentially seeding if they do. They are one of several teams right at the bottom still fighting for those 7 and 8 spots. Outside of that, if I have to play a guy probably again still on FanDuel, I'd be looking to play Terrence Ross at 4,800. I think he is, I don't have him projected for within 5 points of, but a reasonable pivot off of Lemon Lime. If you were going to go there again today on FanDuel, same position, same price. Again, the matchup is great. I think there's an upside there. So as one of many spots and many guys with whom you can pivot away from Lemon, you could go there. Augustine priced, nicely enough on FanDuel that I'd have some minor exposure if I was building a pile of lineups, but that is about it. Not one of the better games on the evening. Moving on to the second game of the night, Indiana and Detroit, actually on a home-to-home. These teams just played a couple of days ago, and despite their reputations as being more defensive, slowly paced game, and again, I would still expect this to be slow, we did manage to procure a number of fairly useful fantasy outcomes out of that last game. Blake is not going to play again. Luke Kennard is in. Again, the FanDuel price on Reggie Jackson is kind of appealing. Played 31 minutes, I think, in that last game. Had a very decent fantasy game. It's worth pointing out that Ish Smith is probably the best minimum price drop on FanDuel, now at home hosting. Neither of these teams on a back-to-back. Very few games yesterday, very few games tomorrow. The only team on the front end of a back-to-back is the 76ers, and as alluded to on yesterday's show, the Hawks, the Nuggets, the Rockets, and the Spurs are the four teams who played yesterday and are playing as well today. Again, on a slate this big with just better games and so many options, I don't think I'm ending on the Langston Galloways or Wayne Ellingtons of the world, but Wayne Ellington, one of the guys who did come up with a very useful fantasy game this last time out. This Pacers defense, which had already been trending in the wrong direction, takes another couple hiccups down when you remove Darren Collison and Wesley Matthews and replace them with more Corey Joseph and Tyreek Evans. I would rather run Ish than Corey Joseph, again in that low-priced FanDuel point guard spot. Kojo, though, certainly not out of play. Either side at 3,600, 3,800. Played 30-plus minutes in that game. Will likely do so again. Bears consideration just based on price and time we expect him to see, but again, not a real super fantasy producer, and this not a very good matchup. The Pistons defense has actually held up pretty well, as opposed to the Pacers defense trending in the wrong way. I like Tyreek a lot. I have him slightly less than Troy Brown at that interesting small forward spot on FanDuel, where they're both pay down options. I don't have a problem playing them both. I don't have a problem playing either of them. I have Troy Brown projected slightly higher as far as raw production. But Tyreek played about 27, 28 minutes in that last game, had about that many fantasy points. Still very interesting, and compared to, say, Corey Joseph, carries a much higher upside. Better player doing a lot more than Troy Brown. Obviously, far worse matchup, and that's going to affect how much we like these guys. Thad Young was good in that game. Again, don't think I'd get there on a slate this size. Miles Turner's price has come way up in what's not a great matchup for him, to be certain. Has played Drummond tough a couple times, but don't really want to spend 8 on FanDuel or 7.3 on DK for him. Not really going to get to Sabonis. Doug McDermott is, again, never the answer. Aaron Holiday, another guy in 150 lineups I'd have 1 or 2 of only on FanDuel, where he's also 3,500. Would have him behind Corey Joseph, who I have behind Ish Smith, making him my third favorite value point guard in this game, which is quite saying something. Bojan, a strong cash play. Not sure I see the upside for him on this slate at that price. I like Drummond quite a bit, obviously. On FanDuel, I slightly prefer Vooch. On DK, I greatly prefer Andre Drummond. Having Blake out is obviously all kinds of cookies for him. I like him quite a bit. I don't know how to go more than that. I like him more than Karl-Anthony Towns at their various prices on DK. FanDuel, it would go back to Towns, but one of several high-priced options. Someone asking again in the chat, will there be rankings today? There will not be rankings today. I have been ill, and the size of the slate and the late-breaking news, and spending more time on the floor of the bathroom than I had hoped to have precluded my ability to do that. I will answer every question I can out of the premium Slack, and I hope that's good enough, but that's what I got for you today. I do apologize. Let's go ahead and move on to the next game, one of the more du jour matchups, if you will. One of those funny things in fantasy basketball where the good games are frequently the dreadful games in real basketball. So as opposed to, say, the Nuggets and the Warriors last night, you get the Bulls and the Wizards today. Lots of guys priced a little more advantageously. Several injuries making this interesting. Again, the Bulls missing their entire starting lineup that they would want to play, counting Wendell Carter Jr. Rolo's still in there to sort of represent being a professional basketball player. Walt Lemon Jr. is going to be one of the chalkier guys today. Let's take my first look at ownership. I imagine he is towards the top. We're checking DraftKings first. I'll guess like 5th or 6th. Because that DraftKings tag is a little more. He's down quite a bit. 18% on DK. I'm fine with him at that number. The matchup is extremely good. The most likely scenario sees him again playing 30-plus minutes, then giving that time to him, Jakar Sampson, those other guys. There is some degree of uncertainty, but have him projected north of 30. A fine play at 4,800, 4,700. Comes down to an ownership decision. I don't hate Shaq Harrison. Again, just does a lot. Much better play on FanDuel, 6,100. DK, 6,300. I'm going to play Jamal Murray. I'm going to play a number of other players. FanDuel, 6,100, I have some appeal because, again, 4 or 5 steals, throwing on 12, 15 fantasy points onto his total. Not a weird thing out of him. I don't mind going back to Wayne Selden at 4K on FanDuel. Again, out of play on DraftKings at 5,100. 4K on FanDuel, guy should see into the mid-30s in minutes. That feels just fine. Don't think I would end up getting to M.A. Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot. Jakar Sampson on DK, 4,800. No thanks. But again, FanDuel, 3,500 minimum price, small forward, which is a position we're always super happy to punt. I imagine a little bit chalky. Let's go ahead and click over to FanDuel. Jakar Sampson, number 1, 38%. I would rather play one of the 2 pay-up options, though raw points per dollar I would have Sampson a little bit higher than them. I would probably rather play Troy Brown than play Tyreek Evans, then play Jakar Sampson in one lineup. I have no issue going down to that if you don't mind being a little chalkier. If you need that $800 for something, I think that makes all kinds of sense. That's enough time to talk about the Bulls there, or the G League Bulls, the Windy City whoever's. The Wizards, much better. There's really no one on the Wizards who I would have any issue with playing. Troy Brown, a really strong play on FanDuel. Should see 30 whatever minutes again with Jeff Green done. Trevor Ariza done. The minutes at the 3 should be there for him. He's going to get 30-something minutes in a fairly brilliant matchup. Bryant or Portis, somebody asked. I would prefer Bryant pretty significantly there. I think I'm right on like my last 4 or 5 tries on Jabari Parker or Portis. I'm going to go with Jabari Parker again today for the minutes, for the position, for the matchup. Feel a little bit better about that. There has been sort of a narrative with them going back and forth with the big minutes. I'm not going to have an issue with anyone playing Bobby Portis in any format. 6,200 on FanDuel is an especially brilliant price, and he can obviously destroy this matchup. I would be slightly happier to play Jabari Parker on either site than Bobby Portis on either site, but Bobby Portis is an absolutely fine tournament play. Brad Beal, again, casualty of a large slate and a significant price. There are a lot of very good guards. There's Luka, who certainly gets into the conversation here, who I prefer to Brad Beal on both sites, but I would have some exposure to Brad Beal in just a beautiful matchup. Even Tomas Satoransky, especially DK in play. FanDuel, you can go with a couple other guys, probably go to Rubio, probably go to a couple other guys before I got to Tomas there. He's not been so involved in the offense recently, but especially DK, where you get the double-double, triple-double bonus. Those are things that, especially in decent matchups, he has shown the ability to do from time to time. Let's talk about Boston, Miami, another couple of teams on a home-to-home that just played. Kyrie Irving is too inexpensive on FanDuel. Again, this is another matchup that occurred the other day, and I was worried wouldn't be terribly productive. And we got a few decent players. We had a very good Bam Adebayo game. We had a very good Goran Dragic game. We had a decent Dwayne Wade game, who gave you about 35. And shout out to the guy in chat whose name I forget, who asked me about playing Horford and Tatum in this game, and I said, no, what a bad idea in a slow-paced game, and then Tatum went out and got 35, and Horford had like 55. We have the news that Horford will play, will start. He'll start next to Baines again. We will have no Marcus Morris in this game. We will have no Jaylen Brown in this game, which certainly frees up a few minutes for a couple people. Again, that brings me back to Liking Kyrie Irving quite a bit on FanDuel. Someone just asked about Tobias Harris or I think John Collins. I would probably rather go with John Collins at this point with Jimmy Butler in and playing, but that's obviously very close. And obviously the matchup just fine for Tobias. I'll take a look at the ownership in a second. That'll be a little instructive. Kyrie Irving or Marcus Smart FanDuel, both a little too cheap on that side. Jaylen Brown being out helps them both a little bit. It's not enough to get down to, say, Terry Rozier, but it's relevant just because of Rozier's price. But especially on FanDuel, both those guys priced extremely nicely. I don't have an issue with either of them. Still wouldn't end up being priorities for me on such a massive slate with so many games that are better on paper, per se. I like Al Horford. Marcus Morris being out, helps him some more with time. His minutes probably trend up a little bit. Neither of these teams on a back-to-back 6,500 can play him at forward. I like Al Horford. No issue with you going there. Again, not quite a priority for me. And again, basically same story as Jason Tatum at 65 and 59. Minutes increased a little bit. When we look across the ball, it's sort of the opposite story with I think everyone is going to play. I think Richardson and Winslow and Magruder are going to play. This makes it really hard to like anyone on this team. All the ball handler guys on this team being Waiters to a degree, Dragic and Wade had been performing up a little bit. Wade never really got there as much as we want, but we got a giant Waiters game, couple giant Dragic games. Bringing those guys back in will imperil their minutes. You will have Winslow I presume starting and Dragic going to the bench. I'm not sure what lineup they're going to start, but when this team goes from missing three guys to adding back in Richardson and Winslow, which really suck up a lot of minutes, and even having Magruder out there and available, it's really tough to like any of these guys at their prices against the Celtics. Bam's price is up. This is probably a full fade for me. If I'm going anywhere, it's Waiters at 5,100 on FanDuel, and even that I feel like would be, top 12 maybe shooting guard option on FanDuel. Let's go ahead and talk about a more appealing game. Philadelphia going into Atlanta. Anthony Davis has been ruled out. We'll get there in a second, but I feel myself being interested in getting some wood right about now. At least I would if I was feeling better. Anthony Davis has been ruled out for the second game in a row after being probable. We're going to have a talk with them at some point about what probable means. Where were we? Yes. Philadelphia going into Atlanta. Atlanta, very rarely are there guys who expect to play significant time against Atlanta that we are not going to have some degree of interest in. And certainly this is no difference. Here, the price on Jimmy Butler up significantly on DK, where he's up to 79. Would have really liked him 72, 74. Nothing wrong with 79. You will get him at a lovely low price, ownership rather. FanDuel, the price has actually come down. I like him actually a reasonable bid at 8,400. Among the many things the Hawks do for you besides playing fast and not playing much defense, they're getting a little better that way. They turn the ball over a lot, so that feels good for guys like Jimmy Butler and Ben Simmons. Last time these two teams got together, you got 55 out of Ben Simmons with everyone there. They started their standard five with Redick and the Fantastic Four. I still like Ben Simmons just fine. I still have him a little bit ahead of, say, Damian Lillard and a couple of the other guys I like there. I like him less than Luka Doncic point per dollar. I like him more than Booker. There's obviously a lot of very good spend-up options, but Simmons still towards the top for me. Butler being back in takes a little bit of the shine off Tobias Harris, who's still too cheap on FanDuel. But still, again, Hawks, he's going to be in play regardless, and it's still Hawks minus Embiid. So it goes from being, Jesus, these guys are going to have a lot of trouble failing, to be like, they still look really, really good to me. So Harris, Butler, Simmons, no issue. Redick, really no issue. More so on FanDuel, where again he's $100 dollar per dollar cheaper, and at a much more advantageous position, but certainly not out of play on DK if you landed on him in a lineup. Not super excited about Jonah Bolden with the price coming up. Again, I'm just fine with him. Probably plays 30 minutes again. We don't know that. Matchup couldn't get any better. There's not even any deadmen who would, in theory, slow him down a little bit. It's a really fine spot. So, fine to go there. But, again, we'll have some popularity and just one of those guys who I'm less secure in the minutes. Jimmy Butler, J.J. Redick, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, those guys are going to get their time. Jonah Bolden, if I saw you played 14 minutes tonight, would absolutely not surprise me whatsoever, just because they will go to Mike Scott or Boban or whatever the hell. Plus, there's a potential blowout that I think, limits all these guys, in theory, a little bit. And keep in mind that the 76ers are, again, the only team that play again tomorrow. So, a little bit of uncertainty there. But I'm feeling kind of bad if I don't have at least one 76er in my lineup today. The Hawks are going to have basically everyone back. They lose Vince Carter, one of the several Hawks who was disappointing yesterday. But Taurean Prince back and will start. Alex Len will start. Justin Anderson, who would have been pretty appealing still at 3,600 on FanDuel, now probably out of play as he's reduced to a backup role. They will give Porter and Prince the start, I assume. Same sort of dealio there with Bazemore, who, again, in this game yesterday was transcendent. But if you look at, all the mini games before that, he had some real shooting woes. 10 for 16 from the field yesterday against the Spurs, which feels pretty good. His 4 games previously before that, 2 for 11, 1 for 7, 0 for 6, 1 for 7. One of those 1 for 7s against the 76ers, the 0 for 6 against the New Orleans Pelicans. I say this just because I had not one but 2 people be like, oh, I think just Bazemore is so good. I think at that price, even if he's going to get 19 minutes off the bench, I still really want to play him. And none of that is correct or a very good idea. You can certainly still Alex Len. He will get plenty of minutes, 5,400, 5,500. One of the 2 Hawks you ended up wanting yesterday. No issue with you going back to Alex Len whatsoever. It's a fine spot for him. I like John Collins at 7,500, 7,300. It's a fine spot for him. Hoarder always in play in GPPs, though obviously that's a bit of a deep reach on today's slate. And I like Trae Young quite a bit. Only guy who got to 30 minutes yesterday, so the team is reasonably well rested. Another thing that we should talk about and keep in mind here is the fact that this team really doesn't want to win and is going full Gentry style with finding ways to throw away games, which gives me concern for a lot of teams. But the Hawks and the Pelicans are 2 of them where they make bizarre substitutions where it's like, wow, Julius Randle is just absolutely going the hell off. I guess he'll sit the entire 4th. Yesterday, of the people who were jumping up and down on me saying that you were down on the Hawks, because at halftime it looked like 5 of these 8 somewhat chalky Hawks were going to be good. 2 ended up being... Bazemore was amazing. Len was very good. Davis was okay, and 5 of them were shit. And one of the reasons why was, A, as I said, they spread the minutes really thin, but B, especially because it was too close. Like, they were doing really well, and they're like, oh, shit, better take our better players off the court. Alex Len was obviously having a great game, so the game was pretty close, so they sat him the last 7-8 minutes of the game. Let Deonte Davis go out there and fill up his line a little bit. So one of the reasons that you need to have some concern with John Collins and Julius Randle at power forwards or Trae Young and Elfrid Payton is in the guise of rest and end of year, you are seeing some somewhat odd substitutions. So cheap guys, I'm never really going to have any issue with you playing Kevin Huerter, playing Kent Bazemore. He's still 3,800 on FanDuel. You're fine to throw that away if it doesn't work out. But there is something to be concerned with the substitution patterns and just how junky these teams can be in that context. 1/7:30 game left. The Raptors at the Nets. I'm honestly surprised we haven't heard that the Raptors are going to rest somebody here. The Raptors have basically nothing to play for, and this again should make you a little suspect about their minutes. You have Lowry with Leonard in. That's never my favorite thing in the world. It's a nice pace-up spot. I wouldn't look at Lowry in a tournament lineup and immediately dismiss it as someone making a horrific mistake, but a little dicey for me in that situation. Sorry, responding, making sure none of these tweets are you missed some horrific news. And again, I've had a somewhat distracted afternoon, so in the event I say something you think is strictly incorrect as far as playing, not playing, feel free to follow up with me. I have news coming from a lot of sources, but especially handling the show by myself, I encourage any such feedback. Don't really want to play $6,000 Fred VanVleet today. Again, this looks like a fine matchup. Kawhi over $9,000, usually never someone we love. Lowry, Pascal, everyone being in there limits his upside a little bit. The matchup is great. Now, I guess the reason I say it this way is I'm sort of disappointed not to like someone more here. Now, to an extent, I'm not. We have Philadelphia and Atlanta. We have Chicago and, Washington. A couple teams that guys carry similar upside and are just way the hell cheaper than spending 7 to 8 for Pascal, over 9 for Kawhi Leonard. Anyhow, Danny Green, unlikely to have multiple massive games in the same week, so even FanDuel 4,500 droppable, I don't think I'm going back there. Plus the thumb issue on his shooting hand doesn't make me super excited to go there. Pascal Siakam on FanDuel is 7,400. I think against the Nets you can just roll that out regardless. I do think there's enough upside there. But this, again, is the final 7:30 game. It's 6:29 right now. I'm not surprised if in the next 30 minutes or 60 minutes we hear that Marc Gasol will rest. Kyle Lowry will rest, I think would probably be the most likely one. So again, going to keep talking, but I expect some news to which we can take advantage to open up at some point in the next 30 minutes. And whereas I like a lot of this chalk, none of it is really quite so brilliant so far. We haven't really run into this guy costs 3K and I project him for 35 fantasy points so far. So it's an interesting slate, just as there aren't that many great matchups for a 12-game slate, and the value is not that brilliant yet. Does the return of the Heat players affect the bigs like Kelly O? Yeah, it does. A lot of these guys play multiple positions. So Derrick Jones Jr. being out still makes Kelly O, on FanDuel most importantly, okay. I'm not super thrilled with it. I wouldn't have him in one lineup, but at that FanDuel price, I feel it's advantageous enough I'd go at it. I would rather play Frank Kaminsky for even greater savings on FanDuel, but I don't have issue with some Kelly O there. But it does affect them pretty significantly. No Rodions Kurucs, even at minimum price for me, looking across the ball. Again, this is a tough matchup for these guys. D'Angelo Russell can absolutely get it going, even in this spot. If you're going to pay up, I don't have an issue with him in GPPs. But again, that that $8,000 to $9,500 or even $10,000 if you want guard position has 11 plays I like, and I have Russell behind Luka, and I have him behind Donovan Mitchell, and I have him behind just a number of guys. So again, if you show me your D'Angelo Russell lineup, I think it's just fine. The ownership will be nominal for a guy who does carry a giant upside, but there is a reason for that. Still no news of consequence, so let's just move on to the next game for the moment. Another game that we should like a lot. Charlotte, whose defense stabilized for a while, but then the removal of Cody Zeller. Marvin's going to be out tonight. Should be really a defensive train wreck. They're going to run some guys out there who do not defend well against the New Orleans Pelicans. I like Christian Wood quite a bit now. Obviously, Anthony Davis isn't going to play. That makes his minutes for me likely. I have him at 29 right now. I'm not shocked if you see 33 and just a productive guy in what's now a real cakewalk of a matchup. I'm concerned by the price, obviously. I'm concerned that, Cheikh Diallo has a game, and so he gets all the time. It is risky. But we've seen the kind of upside the guy carries. Going to be an ownership decision, which I'll get to as soon as I can, if I can. But I like Christian Wood at this point. Again, you are going to see, I'm guessing who's going to start for this team is somewhat interesting. Pretty sure Kemba's going to start. I imagine Bismack continues to get his sort of ceremonial center start. Elsewhere, we've seen the minutes start to come down for Bacon and Bridges. I mean, not in gradual coming down, as in they've just suddenly disappeared once in a while. There's obviously some concern there. Their prices have come up, so I understand why you take them against New Orleans. New Orleans is a pretty cake matchup. It's one where we want to look. But the guys I'd be most interested in here, again, are Kemba Walker at 9K. Showed again last game he has super sexy takeover mode. They're giving him some leash to play for free agency. They are giving him, obviously, all the usage that he can. Marvin out. Yeah, that was to be expected. So, sans Marvin now, I like Frank Kaminsky a lot on FanDuel. The matchup is great at $3,800. And I'm not surprised if he starts in this spot. I think it's less than 50%, but, greater than 25 that Frank Kaminsky gets to start here. But regardless, I have the minutes now at 28. You could see a couple more in that. I'd be surprised if you saw less than 24. And again, FanDuel is 3,800 and droppable and carries an upside in a pretty massive matchup. Pretty big fan there. Also like Jeremy Lamb. Again, more on FanDuel. Jeremy Lamb, $500 less dollar per dollar FanDuel. Frank Kaminsky, $800 less dollar per dollar on FanDuel. Jeremy Lamb, only $4,900. Got back to 30 minutes last game. Matchup is so good that I still haven't projected for under 30 minutes. I am at 27 right now, but I'm not surprised if he sees 32. I'm not surprised if he sees 22. It is tournaments only. There is some risk there. Hopefully I'm being clear about that. Yeah, my number one guys there, especially FanDuel, Lamb, Kaminsky, and Kemba. Kemba also much cheaper on FanDuel relatively. He's $9,000, $8,900 on DK. I can handle Dwayne Bacon on FanDuel where he's $4,000. On DK, you want to get some exposure to these guys, but it's much tougher. You don't want to play, Biombo. Walker at $8,900. The only guy I super love there, but certainly no issue with some exposure to Kaminsky or Lamb. As far as the Pellies go, still no Frank Jackson, obviously no Drew Holiday, no Etuan Moore, no Darius Miller, Anthony Davis now going to sit out again. Christian Wood leads the way for me. Profiles pretty similarly to Julius Randle. I have him for about 5 fantasy points left, but he's $2,000 less. That's a pretty relevant discrepancy for me there. Don't really want Kenrich. Ian Clark, another FanDuel only special, $3,600. I think that's fine. This matchup is great. Guy can randomly spike a 35 and a $3,600 makes sense. DK, I'm trying to go elsewhere. Alfred Payton, obviously the price is up with all the just better plays on a larger slate. And me, again, not being super. Check the ownership on Willie on DK. I imagine it's high. I really, really like Hernan Gomez. Thank you for the reminder there. He's 4,100, I believe, on DK is the number. The matchup is great. I liked him all day, and now we've removed Anthony Davis from the equation. So, yeah, he is obviously brilliant on DraftKings. We have him currently at 40% ownership. That feels pretty good. We have Von Robb at 50% ownership. I have some nervousness. Now, his price is brilliant, and you obviously could be looking at a massive amount of time, but you also could be looking at, Joakim Noah starting and him only getting 22, 24 minutes. Is 4 Hornets too many on FanDuel GPP? I added Bridges in addition to the 3 you like. Yeah, I don't want to play McCall Bridges. Turn McCall Bridges into Tyreek in an upgrade, or Troy Brown in an upgrade, or Jabari Parker if you can come up with the $900 difference or whatever it is, or something else there. So, yes, I would be disinclined towards that. But yeah, thank you for the reminder on me somewhat humorously not mentioning Sweet Dick Willie. Obviously a fine spot for him. You worry about situations where he gets yanked because the defense is so bad. That's harder with no Marvin, one less guy to pay that position. You worry about him being in, a position against a decent defender. Certainly not going to be looking at that there. $4,100. Yeah, he profiles as brilliant. Thank you for the reminder. Pellies, yeah, Wood leads the way for me. You can play Julius Randle. Feels a little dicey. Might get 34 minutes. Might get 30 minutes, and again, they want to lose, so if this game is close, he's one of the guys who will just mysteriously spend more time on the bench. Check Diallo, not out of play for me. Again, FanDuel, $3,600. Let's go ahead and move on to another game. If I happen to truncate anyone else, I will trust you will all get on me forthwith through questions, and we can discuss it. Minnesota going into Dallas. I still love Karl Anthony Towns coming off several poor games in a row. There is no reason he shouldn't smash in this matchup. I don't think he's forgotten how to play basketball. There was a back-to-back in there that I suppose could have been relevant. The minutes are down a little bit, but I still like Towns a ton on FanDuel at 10-8. On DK, I slightly prefer Andre Drummond at 9,700 versus the 10-4 for Karl Anthony Towns, but I still think he's great. No issue with Wiggins. Again, much better FanDuel if you can get there. No issue with Okogie on FanDuel as a lemon pivot. In what is still a pretty good matchup. Best play of this game for me across the best pay-up center on FanDuel, Towns. He is to me, yes. Best play of this game for me across the ball is Luka Doncic. I love him. There is no one on this team that should give him much trouble. You have some concern that minutes could be limited. Hasn't been 100% healthy, but the 60+ upside is very evident and possible in this situation. Playing to solidify Rookie of the Year, basically, at this point. I have to think he's even a little more hoggy than normal. That makes him pretty exciting with him, and everyone else gets a pretty serious haircut. Burke had come up. Kleber's minutes come down. Powell's price is back up over 6 everywhere. Dirk, just not enough of a ceiling to play on a slate like this. Justin Jackson, much less usage there. And Jalen Brunson, who disappointed me in that last game where I thought he would take more advantage. Poop. Spurs going into Denver. Again, everybody here on a back-to-back in Denver. I really liked both the point guards in these two teams. I still really like Derek White at 5,000. His ownership is projected for not high enough. I don't know. Didn't come up on my first page. 4%. Yeah. It's a decent matchup for him. It's not what he had yesterday, remotely, but still at 5,000, he's a guy who I think does carry 40-point upside. So DK, I like that play quite a bit, and I also like Jamal Murray. Both of them are also shooting guard eligible, helping you with your roster construction. I like Murray more than White. I would rather play the 5,900 for Jamal Murray than the 5,000 for Derek White. Jokic is going to be in play every day. Not a great spot for him. I would rather play all the expensive centers we've talked about so far. So he's behind Vooch, behind Towns, behind Drummond, etc. But it's still Nikola Jokic, and even in bad matchups, busts out with 65 from time to time, and what I expect to be 3-4% ownership. Certainly some appeal there. Price on Millsap has come down even a little bit more. Dropped a couple $100 on both sites. No issue with him in tournaments. Don't think I'd get there in first 10, but someplace you could go. Don't really want a Barton or Harris on this spot. So for me, really, Jamal Murray, Derek White, Aldridge on DK. Prices come down enough where I can see him getting there. He's fine in tournaments, fine in cash, but not a game overall that I think we should be looking to target. Utah at Phoenix. Again, sort of the Hawks theory. Not going to find guys who we expect to play any significant minutes on a team playing against Phoenix that we're going to have any issue with. Rubio priced a little better on FanDuel. Some interest there. Like him a little more than Satoransky, like him a little more than some of the other mid-price guys. Not brilliant, but certainly don't mind him in tournaments. Donovan Mitchell, the DK price is really nice, 8,200. I like that spot quite a bit. I would rather play him than Devin Booker, for example, though I have him bid under some of the other high-priced shooting guards. I have him under Luka, for example. Jay Crowder, I think, is actually pretty interesting, 5,100 on FanDuel. I like the matchup for him. You're not going to get him in one lineup. I would be more inclined to pay some of the guys around 4K than going up to 5 for him. But the time should be there, should look good. Punting with Thabo Sefolosha is on the very edge of reasonable. I like Rudy Gobert quite a bit on DK. I have him right in amongst those other high-price guys. You're obviously saving 1,200 off Drummond. You're saving significantly off Towns. You're saving significantly off Vooch. And the spot is pretty brilliant for him. A bit cashier than the other guys. Upside limited a bit relative to these other guys. But I'm not going to have any issue with cash or tournaments. Any lineup that I see having Rudy Gobert in it. Tough spot for the Suns for me. Wheels finally fell off the wagon with Devin Booker last game. Again, for him to get to the numbers he was putting up with his type of game. Occasionally gets you a couple steals, but not a super peripheral guy. Playing a lot of essential point guard, although Jamal Crawford's handling the ball a lot with Jamal Crawford gotten 30 minutes 3 games in a row. On the edge of playable on DK at 3,500. Again, if you're not playing the Jazz, that's a much more interesting conversation for me. But Jazz, 12-game slate, Jamal Crawford, those 3 things give me and probably should give you pause. Don't care about Okobo, who got the start last time, sort of, versus Melton. I'm not going to say don't play Devin Booker, but points per dollar, he would be my 6th favorite shooting guard over $8,000. That is just a really expensive number to play for that guy against the Jazz. I just can't get there. No reason to do McCall Bridges on this slate. I like Rashawn Holmes on DraftKings, 5,200. Just a really good fantasy player. Not that different from Christian Wood. Christian Wood has a much better matchup, but costs you an extra, $10, $12, $1,400. Rashawn Holmes has a shittier matchup, but at the DK price, good bit of interest for me still at 5,200. I don't think I want to try Josh Jackson here. Not a lot of love for the Suns here. 12-game slate. I'm trying to take as few players as I can. Against the Jazz, 2 games to go. Grizzlies going into Portland. Mike Conley is doubtful. Valanciunas out, I believe, for the year, but certainly for an extended period of time. Still no Avery Bradley, Kyle Anderson, Jaren Jackson, some of those other fellows there. Certainly some appeal. This matchup is just fine for me. I'm not worried about this Portland defense when you replace, McCollum and Nurkic with Cantor and Curry, as I feel I've said 5 times in the last week, because I have. I like Delon Wright if I'm going to look at one of the guards from this team. On FanDuel, it's him or Tyler Dorsey are both very close. Again, you have $4,300 for Tyler Dorsey. We have seen that he has ceiling games. I think we bit off a little more than we could chew at the beginning there with remembering this was a guy who was struggling to crack into the Hawks rotation for quite some time. He is not all that in a bag of chips, but he might be the bag of chips. So $4,300 on FanDuel, I can get behind Dorsey. But either side, I would rather play Delon Wright, who does carry a 45, 50-point upside. We've seen it a few times when you take Mike Conley out of there. And it isn't a bad matchup at all. I would actually rank it as slightly better than average. I don't really feel the need on this slate to get up to Caboclo prices where you're, paying more than Rashawn and slightly less than the Woodsman. Von Rob, 4,800 on FanDuel, playable. Definite real chance of 30 whatever minutes. Had been playing some backup 4, had played starting at the 5. Again, we have no Valanciunas quite possibly. He starts at the 5. If not, he's going to get backup time at the 4 and the 5 if Caboclo starts there. $4,200 on DK is an appealing price. I would have less than the current 50% projection we have, but simply because he profiles pretty similarly to a lot of guys in that 4K range, and I don't need to take the one who's 50% owned on a 12-game slate. It's worth pointing out how dumb 50% is on a 12-game slate. I just want to be super clear about that. Don't really feel the need to Chandler Parsons here. I have a non-zero amount of interest in Joakim Noah if you can play him on a site where you find out that he is A, both healthy, and B, starting. Looking at the Trailblazers, I still like Damian Lillard. He one of a few guys this year who ended up in an injury-based spot and took a while to reduce. We had, George without Westbrook and vice versa. We had a couple guys who were just the first few games crapped themselves. We had Harden without Paul and vice versa. Didn't go as well. We had Gordon without Harden and Paul. Just occasionally a few guys take a little while to adjust to that role. I still think Damian Lillard has 75-point upside here at $10,000. He's in play for me on both sides. Point per dollar, he is going to rank worse than Luka and some of the other guys we've talked about. But I still like Damian Lillard quite a bit. I like Rodney Hood in a decent matchup, and actually what's legitimately a good matchup at this point. Both these teams, very good defensive teams for the majority of the year, which is really funny for some of the algorithms I've seen today. But both, due to injury, playing much faster and defending much, much worse at this point. So Rodney Hood, who got the start last game, shout out to a couple people who won late slates, talking on that as I recall. Got there when that news came out. 42 and 39 are the numbers on him. Those both make plenty of sense. I like those over some of the chalkier guys we're talking about. Mo Harkless at 47 on DK on the edge of playable. Don't really want to go there. Al-Farouq Aminu at 5 and 5+. Don't really want to go there. Prices continued to come up for Enes Kanter. He's still in play for me after 2 games where he was chalky and underperformed. I think I started 2 successive shows saying I still have a lot of interest in Enes Kanter. He is just an upside guy, and people's understanding of what's a good matchup and a bad matchup for Enes Kanter is similar to Jared Allen or other guys, where when he can spend a little more time under the basket, and even in a couple other matchups, he has shown the ability to have a big upside. They've shown they will play him 32 minutes, and he's shown he can give you 50 in that time. Points per dollar, he's not going to rank in my top 7 or 8 centers, but I would have exposure in some number of lineups. His ownership will have come up a little bit relative to size of slate. Obviously, his ownership will be down versus a slate a third the size of this one. Not super into the Seth Curry at the increased price situation here. Going on to what I hope and pray is the final game. Houston visiting the Los Angeles Clippers. Gerald Green, I believe, is going to sit this one out again. Kenneth Faried won't play, although those minutes will mostly flow to Nene, who should be in there and willing to handle that. Another situation where I feel kind of about the Clippers or the Rockets as I did last night. They blew out last night. Everyone was looking pretty good. You were going to get 70-75 out of Harden, 40-45 out of Paul, 40-45 out of Clint Capella. Nobody basically played the fourth quarter, which sucked last night. If you had them, the DK lineup that I read out at 7:01 on the air ended up at like 330 something. Someone told me with Capella in there, would have been in there for the Nuts. Not quite as the Nuts as Rinpak, though, who dropped a hot 365 yesterday. Good on you, sir. I don't have any issue with Chris Paul at 81 or 72. I don't have any issue with James Harden at 12-4 or 11-4. I actually have him projected pretty nicely. He gets there towards the top. I prefer Luka. I slightly prefer Donovan Mitchell just because of how high that number is. But obviously Harden has the potential to absolutely bring down the slate and still sits as my overall top scorer today. don't mind Clint Capella and an absolutely great matchup. Looking across the ball, certainly less appeal for me with this team. Talked about Gallinari when he returned from his injury, and I said, look, I think there's a really big upside there. He's going to fail a lot, and I can't be sure he gets his minutes, but the spot is great. If he plays his 30 whatever minutes, he should be really good here. And he, again, has put up 35 to whatever the hell fantasy points. He's put up a minimum of 35 fantasy points, excepting the game he left with injury. He played one game where he played 24 minutes and only had 32 fantasy points. I'm not counting that. I'm going to count that as if he had played, the final 10 minutes, he would have gotten the 3 fantasy points. So he's basically put up 35 plus in 15 consecutive games, and then that last game dropped a 50 burger. Would not have much at all tonight. Matchup with the Rockets is not particularly good. The pace isn't particularly good for him. The numbers have come up, but just wanted to, I guess, pat myself on the back and shout out Gallinari for being season-long draft steal this year. Someone everyone thought was super injury prone, and he's been just great this year. You can play Lou Williams any day. FanDuel price obviously a little more appealing. You're going to get him at low ownership, and he's a guy who can just bang out 50, 55 here. Not a spot I particularly love him in. Would like Montrezl Harrell a little bit more at the same price on FanDuel, cheaper on DK. Are you okay with stacking Paul and Harden on FanDuel? I mean, you got to run it back with Lou Will or something for that to work on a 12-game slate. Cash, I'm fine with it. Pretty unlikely either of them disappoints horribly in a good matchup, but it's a back-to-back for them, so I'm certainly not trying to stack Paul and Harden. Collins or Harrell in a FanDuel GPP. Generally, I'm going to play John Collins in that spot, but that's really close for me. Harrell, believe it or not, a little safer with all the bullshit going on with the Hawks on a back-to-back, though. Of course, John Collins rested yesterday. So I think there's a real chance you get 35 minutes in a massive game out of John Collins, but there is some uncertainty there. But I would still stick with John Collins there. I'm going to take a second, have a drink of something, catch my breath, and then we'll do some questions. Oh, Lord. I feel like I'm sweating through my shirt. Okay, I'm going to get all my alerts set up so we get any last-minute news. Dragic is still starting. Winslow is not starting. That's still a really tough spot for Dragic. He just went the hell off in this matchup and gave you 50 or whatever. I'm not going to look at it as strictly wrong, but that was a ceiling performance. His price has obviously come up from brilliant, make everyone $1 million, $4,100 Dragic day. But Dragic waiters, Richardson, Olenek, and Bam starting. Some more news. The Pacers starting who we thought they would. The Pistons starting who we thought they would. Kurik still starting for the Nets, otherwise starting who we thought they would, so no changing news. I'm going to take a second and get my alerts going, because I'm not surprised if some bullshit lands in the next 10 minutes, and I want to be able to report on it and come up with the ideal pivots as quickly as possible. Thoughts on Josh Jackson, FanDuel GPP? Doable. Like his price there a little bit better at the position. He's a guy, if I was playing 150 lineups, I would have one or two. Obviously has a big upside. First game back from injury, played 30 minutes, did shit. Second game, looked great. Jazz, not a spot I love, but the absence of favors helps you out a little bit. So doable. Points per dollar or guys I'm trying to target would obviously be way down the list, but doable. It is not a play I like, but the upside is obviously there, and the ownership should be pretty appealing. Let me talk about ownership for a minute. Let's refresh. All right, DK at the top. Von Rob. Now he's come down to 41%. That's fine, and you can pivot. So it's fine to leave that spot and hope that Joakim Noah doesn't play. That makes a ton of sense. Number 2, Guillermo Hernan-Gomez, 33%. I'm a fan of that. I would probably have even a little bit more. There's just too much upside at his price there. Number 3, Thon McCurr, 29%. I think that's insane. I like Thon McCurr a lot. He had a great profile in The Athletic. I've read up about him. I've seen him play live twice. I really like Thon McCurr as a basketball player. On a slate this big at $4,300 in a not ideal matchup, for him to be 29%. If he is indeed 29%, I think is crackerjack. I would, if I thought it was going to be 30%, I would just play 0 and be like, all right, hope I beat that 30%. I mean, was very good in the last game against this team. I'm not certain I'm getting no 40 minutes again, and that obviously would limit his production. Not crazy points per dollar, don't get me wrong. He's a very fine play. He's not worth being 30% on a 12-game slate. Luka Doncic, 24. Yeah, I'd have more than that. I love him. Jamal Murray, 24. Yeah, I'd have more than that. I love him. Rashawn Holmes, 22. That's about the right number. Ian Clark, 20. Matchup's really good. Obviously prefer on FanDuel. I would come in under 20 there. 7,300 for John Collins. 18%, that's right. Reggie, 17%. Would rather do it on FanDuel by quite a bit, obviously. Walt Lemon Jr., 17%. I'd even come in a little bit under that. Obviously prefer it on FanDuel with a more advantageous price and even not being out of the realm of droppable. This team has a lot of guys they can throw in there, but profiles very nicely as a guy who should play 30, 32 minutes in what's a great matchup. Drummond, 16, love it. Delon Wright, 16, love it. Tomas Satoransky, 16. I'd come in under that, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with him. It's like I wouldn't have 16%, but I'd have 10, but I can't play him over Jamal Murray, who I like a good 4 or 5 points more. Thomas Bryant, 7,000. Yeah, the spot is there. I would have hoped he was lower owned than this. He's all the way up at 15, which on 12-game slate is a really big number. Elfrid Payton, 14. I'd have less. I'm worried about the bullshit. Mitchell Robinson, 14. I'm fine. Troy Brown, fine. Jahlil Okafor, 14%. Yeah, again, I will play at identical position and restriction Guillermo Hernan Gomez across the ball. I'm a much bigger fan of that. Harden, 13%. I would want more than that. Let's click on FanDuel real quick and discuss that. 4 minutes to go until we hit lock, my friends. Number 1, Jakar Sampson, 33%. Okay. Troy Brown, 31. Okay. Avon Robb, 27. 4,800 on FanDuel. I'd come in under that. I prefer Frank by quite a bit, and I haven't seen Frank's name yet. Frankie! Can you imagine anything more uncouth than me turning into the kitchen and yelling, Frankie? 8% on Frank. Yeah, I'm a little more excited about 8% Frank at 3,800 than 27%. Avon Robb at 4,800. Elf, 76, 22%. Yeah, I'd have less than that. There's just lots of guys I like a little cheaper there. You know why Lemon isn't listed in the FanDuel ownership projections? No. He should be fairly popular. I would guess, looking at the DK number and expecting him to be more popular on FanDuel with a more advantageous price where you're forced into 2 only shooting guards, that he would be somewhere in the 30% range. I assume it is some sort of clerical clip, although there's also some possibility that it is some sort of issue tied to the junior. Sounds dumb, but there are pretty frequently issues that are created when you have the third or the junior or something of that nature. Taking a second and looking at some news here. Really want to be able to move quickly if it hits. It'd be interesting to see who the Heat start at point guard going into the playoffs. Dragic's obviously been good the majority of his games since returning for that injury. I would certainly, be interesting to see if they run him out there or hand the keys back over. Pardon me. How many minutes do I think Jakar gets tonight? I have him for 31. I would be surprised if it wasn't somewhere around there. He's going to get the lemon treatment, things of that nature. So Pacers starting the same team. 2 minutes to log. I'm not seeing it. One minute. There's going to be a little overlay or basically no rake in the main event on DraftKings. Alright, and there we are. We are locked. I hope nobody minds. I am going to skip the ownership thing tonight and take some more medication and hunker down for a little bit. I will, if I am at all able, show back up as the late slates are about to start and answer some questions in chat. My apologies again for the rankings not being available today. Again, I think I've missed it 4 times all year, but that's 4 times more than they should be missed. So best of luck in your contest. Go ahead and tweet me or send me messages in the premium Slack chat if you have any questions about news as it breaks for the late games, which it almost certainly will. Best of luck in your contest.